I've spent the last couple of months overhauling the graphics in my game. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. I also added different objectives to complete, built out a user interface, and improved the conveyor belt logic. Oh, and I also got married, but that's not really related to my game. So let's get into the details of what's changed since last time. The first thing I worked on is something I mentioned in my last video, and that was progression. I wanted the game to start out simple with some small objectives for the player to work on, and have it get more and more challenging as the game progressed. This went hand in hand with the UI development, so I created a panel at the top of the screen for tracking the current objective and got to work on a system for managing these objectives. First, I needed a way of tracking the items that were being delivered to the market, so I created a delivery manager. Whenever an item got delivered to the market, a signal containing the name of the item is sent to the delivery manager. It then tracks that item inside two separate dictionaries. One for the current objective, if there is one active, and then another one for the whole game to track all of the items delivered. This way I can eventually add a page that allows the player to see their stats, including all the items they've shipped. Every time an item is delivered, the delivery manager also checks if that was the last item required for the objective. And if it is, it emits a signal to say that all of the objective items have been delivered. Once that happens, I needed a way of moving on to the next objective. And for that purpose, I created an objective manager. This is a pretty small script. It retrieves the objective based on the current game level and then passes it on to the delivery manager so that it can track the progress. At the same time, I disabled a lot of the machines and linked them to the game levels, so that as you work through the objectives, more and more machines are unlocked. With this system put in place, the next thing to work on was a bug that had been annoying me for a while. I noticed that sometimes when I placed belts by clicking and dragging, the items would move along them and then randomly get stuck. After a lot of troubleshooting, I found a small mistake I'd made in the code. I use a dictionary called tile data to store all of the machines in. The key used for the dictionary is the tile map coordinate, which is stored in variable map pos. So when creating a machine, I create or update the dictionary with data for that particular coordinate. The problem is that when I click and drag, I can drag the mouse across multiple times in between two game frames. So I need to interpolate the path between the start and end points of the mouse. I calculate a mouse path using an A-star pathfinding algorithm, which I spoke about in a previous devlog, and then use a for loop to iterate through the points along that path, adding machines at each one. And the problem that I had was that I mixed up the variables inside of that for loop. Instead of using the coordinates of each point along the path, I was using the point on the map that the mouse finished up on. Changing this variable to point fixed the problem completely. It's quite annoying how often these bugs are actually caused by something really small. I also wanted to make a change to how the belts receive the items. Currently, they can receive items from the back and the sides, which is how it works in Factorio. But this makes the merger completely redundant in my game. So instead, I made the belts receive items only from the back. Since I had already put in the framework for input and output handling in the previous video, it was easy enough to change this on the belt as well. I simply restricted the inputs to be in the same direction as the belt. So if the belt is going left to right, then it can only accept items from the left hand side. This did have a knock-on effect on the curved belts though. These are treated similar to normal belts in that their direction is also determined by their output. So if the curved belt is pointing to the left, the input is going to be from the right hand side, even though that belt is actually curved. This didn't really matter when the belts accepted inputs from all three input sides, but it didn't work anymore. To fix this, I had to be more specific in defining the data of the curved belts. When they're placed, my belts manager works out their input and output directions based on which way they are curving. These inputs and outputs are returned to the tile map, which then places the belts accordingly. Most of the code for this was already there, so after a bit of tweaking, this is what I had. As a final polishing feature, I wanted to make sure that the belts automatically curved towards nearby machines if the inputs and outputs matched up. So if I have a belt selected that is pointing left, and I move it to a machine that has a suitable input, the belt automatically becomes curved, and the input and output data is immediately updated for it. The same works when the belt is placed near an output from a machine or another belt. The way I did this was to look around the belt for what I call feeders or consumers, essentially other belts or machines that have an input or output that matches up with this belt. A bunch of if statements, check for these different scenarios, and then using a function that I created previously, I work out what transform to apply to the curved belt to make it face the correct way. I have been focusing a lot on the game mechanics, but the game itself doesn't look very pretty at this point. So I spent some time working on my game assets and I pretty much redrew everything. On my last devlog, I got a few really good suggestions, most of which I've been able to add, so thanks a lot for those comments. The first change was the background, which I changed to grass to go with the farming theme. I also added in a few tiles with flowers, stones, dirt, and dark grass to add a bit of variety to the scene. My background is a solid image though, I'm not using a tile map for this, so creating this updated image with different tiles became a slightly convoluted process. I created my tile map in Tiled, then export it as an image and use that in my game. It may seem like an odd way to do it, but since the game map is infinite, using a tile map would mean that I would have to fill a certain size of the map with grass tiles and then update them each time the player panned the camera so that there's never a bare patch. I initially got around this by using a parallax background, which is auto-updated when the player pans or zooms the camera, but this means that I have to use pre-generated background images, which I then tile as many times as needed to fit the viewport. Another suggestion was that I should animate the water tiles, but I figured I will do that for all of the resource tiles. So after I redrew them, I added animations to make the whole map feel a bit more alive. All of this has also given me a lot of practice with pixel art and Aseprite. I then updated the theme for my UI, moving away from the bland grey to a more colourful style. One of the issues with my artwork previously was that the colours were quite inconsistent. So I spent a lot of time learning about colour palettes, picked one that I liked, and then tried to remain consistent with using only the colours from that palette across all of my sprites. As I continue working on this game and learning more about pixel art, I may redraw everything again, but I think what I have now is a good step forward from the previous version. If I jump over to my Notion dev board, these are the main tasks that I want to work on next. I want to integrate some kind of tutorial into the game to guide the player at the beginning, to explain the machines as they're unlocked, and to make it easier for the player to get started. Then I've got a few quality of life improvements to make, but what I really want to do is get the game to a stage where I can upload it to itch.io so that people can check it out if they want to. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.